I'll help to explain those of you who have not looked at graphs for a while. So here is the years, 1880, from before colonization, up until 2020, the time of COVID, okay? So this is time along here. Why are we looking at time? Because what happens in landscapes and lives, people think it happens just because of this year, but usually it happens because of things that have gone on for a long time. So here, 0, 20, 40, 60, 80, 100, this is a percentage. This is the percentage of the rice in Sabah that is grown in Sabah.
Okay. Paham? Padi yang ditanam di Sabah.
So before the British came to Sabah, it was 100%. Because before the British came to Sabah, Sabah was not bringing rice from Thailand to you. You grew it yourself. Right? I think they follow, yeah? So during the pandemic, the government started to say in the newspapers that only 25% of the rice eaten in Sabah was grown in Sabah. Everyone following? When did that start? Nobody knew when it started, so I thought, let me look at the old reports from the government agencies. And I found them not in one place. They were all in different places. Nothing like this has ever been looked at in Sabah that I know of. Okay, so what I found was that there was a long history of Sabah importing rice. What I found was that shortly after colonization, Sabah immediately started to import rice.
Okay, selepas colonization, kita start import.
Yeah. Why? Because, I need to say, how was Sabah colonized? This is something they do not teach you in school, which is very strange to me. Sabah was colonized by a private company.
Ya, kamu paham kan?
Yeah, private company.
Sabah punya colonization oleh company swasta.
The deal,
bukan kerajaan.
Yeah, the deal
Company.
was three things only. One, make money, as much money as possible from Sabah. Two, Sabahans must not complain much. Keep them a little bit happy. Okay? Number three, you must help religion spread in Sabah. 3 jobs.
Okay, you understand now?
Yeah.
The company need to make money. Sabahan perlu happy lah kamu. Kami kasih happy sedikit kamu. Tapi kami akan memperkayakan diri kami. Okay? Dan yang ketiga, jarang memperkembangkan agama. Okay? Kamu tahu lah agama apa kan?
You can see now that not changed in Sabah. Still the same.
Ada pertukaran kah sekarang? Dengan politik sekarang?
This is why history is interesting.
Di 3 benda. Ada pertukaran? Tiada kan? Begitu juga politik kan? Make as much money as possible will keep you a little bit happy. And then agama.
So in the first phase of Sabah's colonization, they didn't make Sabahans work. They brought people from other places to work.
Bawa orang dari luar untuk kerja. Orang dari mana?
From anywhere where they could find workers or people interested to come to Sabah because problems at home.
Itulah karena bawa.
And they didn't want to spend money on roads and other things because they didn't want to lose money. They wanted to make money. So Sabah was colonized from the coast and rivers with boats.
Okay, kita punya colonization dari coast, dari laut, dari pantai, pakai sungai dan pakai boat masuk.
Yeah.
Okay.
So you couldn't bring rice from places like Tuaran, from here, all the way to where the towns were and where the plantations were, because no road.
Tidak boleh bawa beras dari pedalaman pergi laut kan. Habis banyak orang yang datang semua di daerah pantai pesisiran.
So they just brought the rice from overseas.
So, bawa tuh beras dari luar lah. You understand?
So this was why all the way up to the Second World War, Sabah was importing rice for all of the towns and all of the plantations and not bothering to buy, not involving itself at all with Sabahan rice production.
Okay, kamu dapat ikut. So, oleh sebab ada ramai yang datang untuk kerja di Sabah, untuk company itu, British North Borneo Chartered Company, dan di Sabah tuh tiada jalan raya yang pergi tempat-tempat yang perdagangan, dia orang import lah. So import pakai kapal masuk terus tanahlah tuh beras dari luar. Jadi dia orang tidak berapa campur tangan dalam petani-petani dan pertanian di kawasan dalaman. Yeah.
That thinking has continued.
Ya.
Yeah.
Itu habit berterusan. Itu
Yeah.
cara pemikiran berterusan.
So for example, the Malaysian government and Sabahan government, their policy emphasis is to arrange with India that India buys Malaysian palm oil if we buy their basmati rice. That's the work the government does.
Ya,
It isn't to try to make rice grown in
kerajaan. Macam beras nasional itu adalah tentang import ekspor. Ya. Jadi India beli sawit, Malaysia beli basmati.
Because the original company that colonized Sabah was a trading company. That's how they were going to make money, from trading, from exporting things in Sabah. Okay, so what happened was, as more and more people lived in town, as more and more people had jobs, the amount you had to bring rice from overseas got more and more and more. Right? The more people lived in town, the more people lived in plantations, the only way to get rice was to import it.
So lebih banyak yang tinggal di bandar dan pekan-pekan kecil, lebih banyak import dari luar.
So this policy, big success, except for every time there was a problem.
Dia successful, tapi bila ada masalah, dia tidak berapa successful.
Okay.
Macam masa COVID.
First World War.
Perang Dunia Pertama.
Sabah had starvation.
Kebuluran.
Because all the big shipping companies in this part of the Pacific were owned by Germans.
Sebab semua shipping oleh orang Jerman.
So the Germans were not going to bring rice to the British colonies.
Yeah. Okay, so masa itu German company mana ada dia orang sibuk berperang. Dia orang tidak akan bawa beras di sini.
And then after First World War, locust swarms. Locusts. I don't know how you say locusts in
Belalang, macam belalang yang
that type of belalang that you see
belalang yang basah,
like in the Bible, you see the stories of the locust. Okay, so terrible disaster. Then in the 1930s, there was a global economic depression. It destroyed international trade. Sabah in starvation again.
Kebuluran lagi, tiada lagi beras. Bila the whole world had an economic depression.
World War II. You always hear that the Japanese were cruel. That's why you were starving. The reason you were starving was the British bombed every ship that tried to go to Sabah when the Japanese were controlling Sabah. So they couldn't import rice, so there was no food. It wasn't because the Japanese were cruel. I mean, Japanese were cruel, but that wasn't why there was no rice in Sabah. Yeah, they stopped. The British strategy for controlling the Japanese here was to prevent Japanese trade. Then there was no food in Sabah, because at that time Sabah was at least half of the rice was coming from overseas. That was the British strategy, how to defeat the Japanese. Did they come here to fight the Japanese? They never came, actually. What they did was they bombed all the ships so the Japanese would be starved and couldn't get support. It was a very good military strategy.
Senang saja kan. Bom saja itu kapal yang bawa beras, habis semua. Tiada makan.
And it was also effective because the Sabahan said the Japanese are bad. We got no food. Right? Very effective. Yeah, that's right. They shifted the hatred to the Japanese. Yeah. Anyway, this is history. Okay, so these crises keep coming. When you have no sovereignty, yeah? When you do not produce your own food, then you know that some problem somewhere else. It was not Sabah who started First World War. It was not Sabah that started Second World War. Not Sabah that caused the Great Depression. But Sabah was vulnerable.
Paham? Sebab kita tidak ada kedaulatan makanan.
The same, the Asian financial crisis in 1998. In the 1988 and then the 2008 crisis. And then the COVID one. All of them, as soon as there was a crisis, no food, no rice in Sabah. So what happened with these crises? Every time there was a crisis, the government woke up. Whoa! We got a plan for self-sufficiency for rice in Sabah. We are going to help the Sabahan farmer. We're going to make road to the Sabahan fields. And those policies last for 1 year.
And then government change.
No, then easier to bring rice from India, from Thailand, from Vietnam.
Yeah, it's easier.
The problem over. We the future, we wait lah.
Never mind lah. Habis.
Okay, so that's the big picture. Some interesting developments. I don't know if you can just show this graphic a little bit. So the history, another part of the history of Sabah is that how is Sabah going to make money? If you look at the history of Sabah, and this started with the company whose job was to make money. That was their only job from their shareholders. All the time in Sabah, there was an idea that we're about to make a lot of money from something. We're about to become rich from something. Tobacco, rubber, whatever. Always is something they're about to get rich from.
And now it's the NCA.
Yeah, it's the same. The pattern continues from colonial time. And always, that thing was never rice. Rice was never going to make Sabahans rich. So rice always behind. So this looks at the latest one of these, oil palm, okay? This is how much oil palm is there in Sabah. Nothing until bang, starts in the 70s, 80s, suddenly in the 90s, whoa! Oil palm is how Sabah is going to get rich. So here we look at how much area of land is planted for rice in Sabah, okay? Starts about here. It doesn't change much because no focus on the problem. It starts to increase a little bit here, but when oil palm comes, goes down. This is partly because rice land become oil palm land, and partly because rice land become road, city, shop, everything from this money from oil palm.
ITCC.
And here you can see the amount of rice imported just go up and up. Okay, go down again. Okay.
The policies.
Yeah, so here in orange here I put the policies. So the beginning, the focus of government was how are we going to import rice? And if there was a problem, we tried to make a special solution. There was a special solution. We're going to bring rice from Burma. After the Second World War, the government put a lot of effort to make sure that people in Burma knew they were growing rice for Sabah. After the crisis in 1930, Malaysia created DID. DID not come from nowhere. What's it in?
Jabatan Pengaliran dan Saliran.
Yeah. It was created in 1932.
Pengairan dan Saliran.
Why was it created in 1932? Because Malaysia couldn't import rice. This problem was also a problem in Malaysia.
So kamu paham kan DID, Drainage Irrigation Department ataupun Jabatan Pengairan dan Saliran, dia punya fungsi adalah connect terus dengan padi. Okay? Bukan untuk air dan saliran, untuk padi. That was the founding of the ID.
Okay, so, but it didn't come to Sabah then. It only came to Sabah later when they had these crises later. It was only in Malaysia. During the war, the British and the Japanese, they tried to make people grow. They tried to force people to grow rice because they could see the problem coming. After the war was when the government in Malaysia started to subsidize Malaysian farmers, not Sabahan farmers, because Sabah not part of Malaysia at that time, but they subsidized Malaysian farmers. It started in the early 1950s. It was also part of making voters happy.
Oh, tepat. So ini sebelum Sabah masuk Malaysia, when it's Malaya, dia orang sudah start to subsidi untuk petani. Waktu tu belum lagi Sabah dalam Malaysia lah. We're still British North Borneo. Tapi satu daripada dia punya tujuan adalah untuk buat pengundi happy. Itu subsidi.
Yeah.
Okay.
So that was an early policy of the Malaya Federation, was to pay rural Malays money as rice farmers.
Kamu tahu sekarang yang subsidi itu sebenarnya untuk membeli undi kamu. Okay?
Yeah. So even now, if you study the rice subsidy, it's not mainly to increase rice production. It's to make rice farmers happy. That's why if you study how they spend the money, it's not the best way to increase the rice. It's the best way to make the farmer happy. Even if the farmer not farming, but is in the list. So. Unfortunately. Okay. But actually what happened in the 1950s and 60s was Sabah started to produce more rice. Sabah was actually able to become more self-sufficient. Why? Because the British government took over Sabah after Second World War. Bye-bye company. Now it's the British government. And the British government started building what? Roads. Now there were roads to Tuaran for the first time. So the farmers in Tuaran could sell their rice. So it actually improved the situation from a lot, because now Sabahan farmers could actually sell rice. But the population was going up, and other changes. Children were starting to go to school in numbers, not working in rice fields. So after Sabah started to see its problem, they created the Sabah Paddy Board. The Sabah Paddy Board. Maybe you've heard about this. Yeah, tiada, yeah. It was closed in 1981. So the Sabah Paddy Board was quite energetic. It was at a time when Sabah was trying to do some things. They improved irrigation. They tried to help with mechanization, seeds, inputs. They promoted rice farming. They also did a lot of settlement scheme. You know the kind of settlement scheme that you have here. Many of you lived through those settlement schemes. And they were more or less successful. We'll look in a minute, actually, at their success. But of course, their problem was that by 1981, they'd got so giving out lots of money was impossible for the Sabahan government at that time. It all became corrupted and politicized, and we'll see the collapse of that.
Oleh sebab politik lah juga dia tutup.
But look in a minute, a tiny bit more of that. Okay, so then in recent years, there's been a lot of plans in Malaysia and Sabah for rice self-sufficiency. They've all involved the idea of modernizing, making Sabah and Malaysia industrial rice producers, replacing the kind of traditional farming here, large-scale mechanization, fertilizers, hybrid seeds. The problem with that policy is that, especially in Sabah and Sarawak, you don't have the kind of soil, the kind of land which is suitable for that. Yeah, your paddy fields are shaped like this. right? They're not ready for a huge tractor to just do this in 1 hour, finish the job. Your water supplies are not reliable. That policy works very well on big flat land, huge river, very fertile soils. So these policies have really struggled, but I think I'm going on too long. So,
kamu dapat paham dia punya policy ini dari ini masa di sini. Dia orang bilang oke, kita buat pertanian padi cara industrial besar-besaran, tapi tidak berjaya sebab kita punya pengairan dan kawasan tanah tidak begini lurus. Kalau mau beribu-ribu hektar, semua mesin saja perlu semua lurus-luruskan, tapi kita begini, air pun tidak stabil.
So since 1992, 30 years, Sabah has had one policy for rice, which is that they want a target of 60% self-sufficiency. And they're going to do it by large-scale irrigation development in Kota Belud and other places.
Besar-besaran buat pengairan.
Okay. So what has happened since 1992? It's gone down from about 35% to 25%. Right? 30 years, the same policy. That's the result. Just got
punya
worse.
Policy bilang 60%, tapi kebenaran dia dari 35 turun pergi 25. Tapi policy dia ini 60%.
Just gone and absolutely zero success.
Ya. Bukan saja zero success, turun.
If you Google is wonderful. I can read the newspaper articles from every year here. And every year they announce, something million, we're going to be self-sufficient in rice.
Like the NCA.
Every year you got the same article. The minister goes to Kota Belud, there's going to be 10,000 new hectares. So that's the situation. But it continues. So probably it's working for somebody, but it's not working for rice.
Okay.
All right, let's look quickly at a couple of other things. Next page. Okay, this is just to remind those of you who, you all come from your different little parts of Sabah. Nearly all rice production in Sabah is here. Can you see that? There's almost none now in Eastern Sabah. Of course, those of you from there will tell us there little bit, and you'll also tell us that you used to, right? In your communities in East. Here, I mean, I don't think we have CSPO, our palm oil colleagues here, but when they did interviews, they found that almost nobody was farming rice. Almost all the land was under oil palm. Okay, so this is where rice is being grown. And if you look at this, of course, these are the areas of the Kadazan Dusun speaking people. And that's a very important feature of rice in Sabah. Murut Mungus people. Yeah, exactly. Thank you for the correction. Yeah. Okay, so so the agriculture department wants rice. Always wanted rice. They have mapped 320,000 hectares suitable for rice in Sabah. We produce 25,000 hectares.
So Jabatan Pertanian memang dia selalu mau push rice, tapi dia kamu tahu kan pada satu masa Jabatan Pertanian memang semua pertanian dia punya jurisdiction, tapi pada satu masa bila sawit mengembang, sawit diambil oleh federal government, MPOB, Malaysian Palm Oil Board. So sawit sudah di bawah Jabatan Pertanian punya power. Semua sawit di Sabah pun di bawah federal. Okay. So ini push untuk lebih tanah dan ini kurang. So Jabatan Pertanian dia tengok oh ada 320.000 hektar yang ngam untuk padi, tapi tidak dapat. Kita hanya gunakan 25.000 hektar saja. You understand?
The agriculture department has passed all kinds of rules that you cannot take paddy land and put road or put houses or anything like that. They passed all these rules, but they cannot enforce the rules because people want road more than rice.
So biarpun dia simpan di undang-undang tidak boleh sudah ini untuk padi, tidak boleh buat jalan raya, tidak boleh buat shopping mall, tapi dia punya kuasa paling dia berkurangan. Jadi kuasa macam agensi atau kementerian yang lain lebih besar. So dia orang menang lah, like JKR, lebih jalan raya, etc.
I won't go into all of this, but agriculture have made many beautiful plans for rice in Sabah, but they never get the political support to implement them. Let's focus in on this one for just a moment here. So this looks at that period when you had the Sabah, the paddy, thank you, perfect. This looks at the time we had the paddy board. And at first, things got a lot better. Under this Tun Hamdan, he was quite successful because he was talking about rice and talking about the importance of rice in Sabah, and he managed to make quite a big improvement before the board collapsed. So it's an interesting example of, even though many of the policies they followed, we now see them as technically wrong, but because of his enthusiasm. And I think that the lesson here is that Sabahans do care about rice, and if you can find a way of talking about rice that makes people care about it, you can get a long way with the energy that Sabahans have. Just very quickly, here's where they're double cropping. Sabah is now in some areas producing 2 crops per year, but it hasn't been able to keep up with the decline in the area farm. So they two rice crop in 1 year.
Oh, I see.
The area of rice is just going down and down because rice land is being abandoned or turned into shopping mall, road, and the other things that you see. In this village, you see that process. Let's go to the next one. Okay, the big problem is urbanization. Okay, so I took the number of Kadazan Dusun people in Sabah. I think I need to do again to include Rungus and Murut, but I took those number and I asked how much, and I took the number how much rice is grown in Sabah, and I tried to see what happened. And the amount of rice grown in Sabah and the number of Kadazan Dusun people did not change from 1880 to 1960. If ada orang Dusun, ada beras. If not, no beras.
Oh, paham. Orang Kadazan Dusun itu angka tuh sama pengeluaran beras dia sama. Kalau ada Kadazan Dusun, ada beras.
Yeah.
Kalau tiada Kadazan Dusun, tiada beras.
It didn't matter if government policy was good or bad or no policy.
Tidak pernah mengena dengan policy.
The Kadazan Dusun grew rice.
Yeah.
Yeah. It didn't matter the price high, the price low. They grew rice. They grew enough rice for what? For 100% of their food, because they were not wanting to buy rice from Pakistan or anything. Yeah. Okay. Until when? Until 1960.
1960 tukar cerita.
Then look, whoa! And now, if we went down to now only 40%.
Sebab semua orang penampang pergi mall sudah sekarang.
So I think if you know this from your own families, probably you already knew this. They already told you, and you can see,
Orang tuaran bisik ya.
Here's 1980. Here's the last 20. This is what your families also tell you. We used to eat our own rice if you're from that background, and now we don't.
Itu juga cerita yang kamu dengarkan, ya, dari semua keluarga.
So 2 things were happening. One is, this is the percentage of Sabah which is urban.
Orang-orang bandar
So they were,
Itu sekarang sana sudah. Ini orange.
and this is the amount of rice imported.
Ya. So ini orang bandar makin hari makin banyak. Ini import beras makin hari makin banyak.
So here there's a difference because there were a lot of plantation worker from Indonesia, or in fact there were quite a lot of orang China as well working in plantations or
Ini
not
semua orang yang kena bawa masuk untuk kerja.
buying food
Chinese,
from overseas.
Indonesian.
Then it became more, just urban. But now you can see this gap here are the people, the orang CKS. So what does this graph tell us? This graph tells us that the problem in rice in Sabah is a cultural issue, as well as an economic issue, as well as an agronomic issue. It's a cultural issue. Do people believe or not in eating their own rice?
So, apa yang Ken cakap, masalah beras di Sabah adalah satu yang utama dia punya isu dia budaya. The second one?
It's not just a problem of economics or a problem of policy, a problem of farming.
Policy utama dia budaya.
Yeah.
What was the second point?
It's not a problem of agronomics. It's not a problem of.
Okay.
Yeah. I mean, here, your project, you succeeded because people had hati. Yes, there was the possibility of earning some money from selling, but when they started the first year, I don't think anyone believed there was going to be waras dati. They just started to believe in wanting to grow rice because there were Dusun people and because there was COVID. That's where it came from. It wasn't that we changed government policy. It wasn't that we brought to them some subsidized fertilizer or anything. I mean, we helped, but I think it was coming from people's hearts.
Yeah, but bawa balik budaya dalam hati.
Yeah. Okay, let's go down. Actually, let's go down here. Okay, so there are some improvement in yield in Sabah. Almost all of it is because of improvement in irrigation. If you want to improve yield of rice in Sabah, improve irrigation. Because the difficulty in Sabah is controlling water. That's something we've not thought about here.
Wait,
Except,
which one is you?
So, just go down a tiny bit, let me remind myself. Okay, wait. I think, just a second.
Irrigation must be blue. You must have used blue for irrigation.
I think so, yeah. I think I forgot to put the marks here. So this is the double crop with two irrigations, and this is the yield.
So apa yang ini cakap, ini blue is water, orange is hasil. Kalau kamu mau menaikkan hasil, kasih improve dia punya pengairan. Terus dia akan improve hasil.
Okay, let's go to. Yes, thank you. Yes.
Okay, this is the one.
All right. So this is now make a bit bigger. Yeah. Okay, up a bit. All right. Okay, so to get all this information was a headache. Really not easy.
Kepala ada buatnya.
But I wanted to get information on what do Malaysians and Sabahans eat.
Dia tengok apa Sabahan suka makan.
Very hard. Malaysia a little bit better. Very hard to get information on Sabah. So this is information on Malaysia because no one collects this information in Sabah. So in 1961, Malaysians ate this amount of rice. This is how much kilocalories per day of rice.
Begitu banyak nasi.
By 2011, it was here, almost half.
2011, kau tengok 50 years turun terus, orange.
Yeah. I think if we look now, it's somewhere like this. Okay. So Malaysians are no longer living on rice. What are they living on? They're living on fat, sugar, and other things.
Lemak dan gula. Kau tengok dulu 1961 berapa banyak lemak dan gula. Lepas tu sekarang begitu tinggi lemak dan gula. Kalau kamu sekarang berkembang badan, kamu tahu kenapa. Wheat.
And they're living on wheat.
Okay, so
right?
pasta, pizza, bread, roti pao.
And also, nowadays you're eating mee and other things that include wheat, not rice. And of course, you're eating much more meat.
Much more meat.
And where is this meat, all this meat coming from? It's coming from maize. You import 4 times as much maize as you do rice in Malaysia.
Empat kali ganda jagung daripada beras.
And you give that to animals, and then you, like especially chicken, of course, and then you eat these industrial chicken.
Dari mana ini jagung? Dia dari tempat yang tidak berapa baik. GMO. Semua kimia. Dan jagung itulah yang kita kasih makan ayam, kasih makan ikan.
So I was able to calculate how much rice is eaten per person in Sabah, more or less. It's higher than Malaysia, not as bad as Malaysia, but still it's going down. I think even you young people, you remember your childhood and now, and you know rice is going down. All right, so does that matter? It's okay, right? We can eat. Why does it matter that we're not eating rice? Let's look at this one here. Oh, actually here, look. Here's the amount of rice eaten per person in Sabah. Used to be more than 200. Now it's somewhere 60, 70, 80 per head. I've forgotten I calculated that. So why does this matter? Because Malaysia has the worst dietary health in all of Asia. The most obesity, the most diabetes, any measure you want, Malaysia is the worst. It's not on this graph.
It's not on this graph.
But you just go online and look at the levels of obesity in Asia, for example.
Okay,
the levels of hypertension or any of the dietary-related diseases.
Connected more to the other graph.
Yeah, it's not this graph. You should go back.
To the
Sorry, I forgot. I thought I had a graph of that. I'd forgotten. Yeah. I did this a couple of years ago.
Satu lagi yang dia punya pendapatan adalah isu diabetes dan isu obesity. Yeah, but what's obesity in Malay? Obesity. Hah? Obes. Paling tinggi adalah di Malaysia. Yeah, higher than anywhere in Southeast Asia. Is it Southeast Asia?
Or even in Asia.
Higher than anywhere in Asia.
There are some parts of India that have similar problems, but otherwise, you are the champion.
But I think if you see this change in our diet, you can see why.
Yeah. Of course, it's worse in KL and so on. Probably when you travel, you see that. But it's coming in Sabah. And it will come whenever people eat this, it's like that.
Apropos of that, look at our snack. Carbohydrate and
yeah. So it's not that eating fats. I mean, eating sugar is not good for you. Eating fat is not bad for you, but it's about balance. It's about balance.
Okay.
So yeah. So this is why. I mean, if you globally, the biggest health problem now is this. This is the biggest health problem.
Masalah kesehatan yang paling besar adalah
ini. As you know, I think every day about Africa. In Africa now, there are more people with ill health because of diabetes, ill health because of other diseases of obesity, than there are people with ill health because they are hungry. In Africa, not talking about Sabah, Africa. The bigger problem in Africa now is diabetes, obesity, and so on. So this is why, this is one of the main reasons why, if you look at the trends in countries which are already worse than here, like US, UK, increasingly people are saying they must go back to whole food. They must go back to healthy foods. And that's why people want to eat, artisan rice. That's why people will pay more money.
That's why you eat wagas dati.
Yeah. So we did calculations in Britain, for example. These calculations have been done. Which is cheaper? To buy wagas dati rice, 15 ringgit, and not go to the doctor, or to buy Maggi mee, 1 ringgit, and go to the doctor when you're old. Much cheaper to pay a lot for food now. Much, much cheaper. Cheaper for the person and cheaper for the government.